Hi, my name is Maddie Robertson, and I decided to do my educational giant project on Horace Mann. So, just some background information. He was born on May 4th, 1796 in Franklin, Massachusetts. As far as schooling goes, he was mostly taught by his parents just at home because they didn't really have the means to send him and his siblings to a good public school. So he learned a lot from his parents, and he also taught himself a lot. He would go to the local library and just do some reading there. And he did go to public school a little bit, but usually only 8 or 9 weeks out of a year. And even when he did, the quality of education wasn't very good, and the teachers weren't very good, and so he just, not a lot of his learning was from public schools. He grew up in an environment of poverty, which actually ended up being one of the biggest factors that kind of shaped all of the work that he ended up doing later. His father died in 1809 and left each of his children $200. And then Horace taught his sister reading and writing from home to save money so they didn't have to send her to school. And then part of that money that they saved was spent on tuition to Barrett School. And so Horace went there for about 6 months, and then he was admitted to the sophomore class of Brown University. And while he was there, he developed an interest in politics and education and social reform. He graduated from there just after 2 years, and he graduated first in his class. And then after he graduated from there, he actually taught at Brown University for about a year. He taught Latin. And then after that, he was admitted to Litchfield Law School. And so that's as far as his education goes. And then after that, that led to the admission to the bar of the state of Massachusetts in 1823. And then he was elected to the Massachusetts House of Representatives in 1827, and he served there until 1823. Some of his beliefs with that, he thought that public education was the best way to bring in social improvements as opposed to other things that they had suggested at that point. And then one thing led to another, and the Massachusetts State Board of Education was created, and Mann served as its first secretary. And since he was put in that position, he was able to kind of spread the word about the importance of education, and he did a lot of good work in that position. That was the beginning of the Common School movement. The Common School movement pushed for a better developed, tax-funded, secular public school system. And Mann knew that in order to have better school systems, he needed to have better teachers, and in order to do that, he had to provide good training for those teachers. And so he worked really hard to provide better training for these teachers, to have better teachers for the students. Horace Mann's views are typically separated into 6 different principles, and so I'm just going to share those. The first principle was that he believed it was not possible for people to be free and ignorant. The second principle was that public education should be paid for, maintained, and controlled by the public. The third principle was that education should be provided for everyone, not just the wealthy. He said education should be for all children of all different kinds of backgrounds. The fourth principle was that education must be non-sectarian, which means it shouldn't belong to a specific group, particularly like religious groups. The fifth principle was that education must be based on the principles of a free society. And then finally, the sixth one was that education must be provided by qualified teachers who were well-trained and professional. And then just to kind of go over a few of his other views, he felt that one of the biggest responsibilities of public schools was to teach moral principles. They didn't have to be related to any religious groups or religious principles, but just he believed that these moral characteristics were essential to, the future citizens of this democracy. Another thing he believed was kind of that education and power could be used interchangeably. He kind of felt like they were the same thing. Like if you have a good education, then you have more power over a lot in your life. Like an educated person has a lot more to work with than someone who's not educated. He said, an educated person is in charge of their own destiny. So he felt really strongly about that. And then he also, like I said before, he believed that all humans were created equal and should be treated that way, that everyone deserved an equal opportunity at this public education. And he also believed that education was a good way for a person to improve the quality of their own life, but just as importantly, it was a good way to improve the quality of society as a whole. He viewed society as a group of individual people who shared all of these obligations. And so obviously, all of these philosophies have had a huge impact on schools today, and they still do.